The Ballad of Blasphemous Bill by Robert Service. I took out a contract to bury the body of Blasphemous Bill Mackay, whenever, wherever, or whatsoever manner of death he died. Whether he died in the light of day or under a peak-faced moon, in cabin or dance hall or camp or dive, mucklucks or patent shoon, on velvet tundra or virgin peak by glacier drift or draw, in muskeg hollow or canyon gloom by avalanche, fang or claw. By battle or murder or sudden wealth, by pestilence, hooch or lead, I swear on the book that I'd follow and look till I found my tuneless dead. For Bill was a dainty kind of cuss, and his mind was mighty sought on a dinky plot on a patch with flowers and civilized boneyard lot. And where he died or how he died, it didn't matter a damn, so long as he had a grave with frills and a tombstone epigram. So I promised him, and he paid the price in good Chichaco coin, the very same I blew that night down at the Tenderloin. Then I painted a 3-foot slab of pine, here lies poor Bill Mackay, and I hung it up on my cabin wall, and I waited for Bill to die. Years passed away, and at last one day, a squaw with a story strange of a long deserted line of traps way up on the Bighorn Range, of a little hut by the Great Divide, and a white man stiff and still, lying there by his lonesome self. I figured it must be Bill. So I thought of the contract I'd made with him, and I took down from the shelf that swell black box with the silver plate he'd picked out for himself. And I packed it full of grub and hooch, and I slung it on a sleigh, and I harnessed up my team of dogs. I was off at the break of day. You know what it's like in the Yukon wild when it's 69 below, when the iceworms wiggle their purple heads up through the pale blue snow, where the pine trees crack their little guns in the silence of the wood, and icicles hang like tusks from your parka hood. When the stovepipe smoke breaks sudden off and the sky is weirdly lit, and the careless feel of a bit of steel that burns like a red-hot spit. And the mercury is a frozen ball and the frost fiend strikes to kill. Well, it was just like that day that I started to look for Bill. The awful hush that seems to crush me down on every hand is a blundered blind through the trail to find in that blank and bitter land, half dazed, half crazed in the winter wild, with its grim, heart-breaking woes and the ruthless strife for a grip on life that only a sourdough knows. North by the compass, north I pressed, river, peak, and plain, passed like a dream. I slept to lose, and then I waked to dream again. River and plain and mighty peak, who could stand unawed as their summits blazed? Who could stand undazed at the foot of the throne of God? North, I north, through the land accursed, shunned by the scouring brutes. And all I heard were my own harsh words and the whine of the Malamutes. Till at last I came to a cabin squat, built in the side of the hill. I burst in the door, and there on the floor, frozen to death, was Bill. Ice, white ice, like a winding sheet, sheathing each smoke-grimmed wall. Ice on the stovepipe, ice on the bed, ice gleaming over all. Sparkling ice in the dead man's chest, glittering ice in his hair, ice on his fingers, ice in his heart, and ice in his glassy stare. Hard as a log, and thrust out like a frog. With his arms and legs outspread, I gazed at the coffin I'd bought for him, and I gazed at that gruesome dead. Last I spoke. Well, Bill liked his joke, but still, gall darn his eyes, a man ought to consider his mates in the way he goes and dies. Have you ever stood in an Arctic hut in the shadow of the pole with a little coffin 6x3 and a grief you can't control? Have you ever sat with a frozen corpse that looks at you with a grin and it seems to say you can try all day, but you'll never cram me in? Well, I'm not a man of the quitting kind, but I never felt so blue as I sat there gazing at that stiff and studying what I'd do. Then I rose and kicked off the husky dogs that were nosing round about, and I lit a roaring fire in the stove, and I started to thaw Bill out. Well, I thought and thawed for 13 days, but it didn't seem no good. His arms and legs stuck out like pegs, just like they's made of wood. Till at last I said, it ain't no use, he's froze too hard to thaw. He's obstinate, he won't lie straight. I guess I got a saw. So I sawed off poor Bill's arms and legs and laid him snug and straight in the little coffin picked out for himself with the dinky silver plate. And I came nigh high to shedding a tear as I nailed him safely down, and I stowed him away on my Yukon sleigh, and I started back to town. So I buried Bill, as the contract was, in a narrow grave and deep, and there he's waiting the great cleanup with the judgment head, sluice head sweep. And I smoke my pipe, and I meditate in the light of the midnight sun, and sometimes I wonder what they was, those awful things I done. And as I sit, the parson talks, expounding on the law, and I often think of poor old Bill and how hard he was to saw.